Good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you are in the world watching this today. My name is Bryan Shue, and you're on Lockdown with Thought Leaders. And today I have the distinct pleasure of welcoming Jesse Todisco to the show. And I've been a big fan of you, Jesse, for a while since we started connecting on LinkedIn and enjoying those conversation pieces that you brought in through your own experiences and through your own show. So Jesse, thank you for joining us today, and I'm going to turn it over to you. So, tell us about yourself, man.
Oh man, well, thank you so much to you and to Derek and Full Moon Media, and also the listeners and the viewers. It's definitely an honor to be here. Thank you so much. Um, just a quick overview. Today what I do is I'm a fiduciary, which is a funny word to say that I have a legal obligation to take care of my clients and put their best efforts in front of their best interests in front of mine. And I do that as a wealth manager, a wealth creator. Basically, what I do is I help people live well now and never run out of money in the future, and take away any cause for concern, any clarity issues, any confidence issues they have around money, any money questions they have, I can answer. And what a time that is now, especially with Corona and the pandemic and the looming recession, because we are heading deep into a recession. It's long overdue, by the way. So if there's one thing I can kind of put in front of the conversation now is this is very normal for the market. We were 2 years overdue for a correction, and there's a lot of ways to come ahead and get out ahead in this correction, which maybe we could talk about. But outside of the wealth management, I have a podcast that's called The Jesse T Show. I've been doing that for close to 2 years. We put out episodes weekly, and it's entrepreneurs, thought leaders, creators, and athletes that come on the show and share their journey, share their vision, share their things they've overcome. I've had people on the show that have had tremendous things they've overcome, like from being disabled to winning world records in sports to being raped and overcoming that. So, I mean, there's all sorts of deep things that go on. But when I'm not doing that, I'm a full-time dad. I love my kids, 2 sons. I'm into martial arts and sports, and I am a collector of experiences. So I love to do things, and I love to spend my money on things that will be remembered and not just material possessions.
Wow, that is awesome. And I love that you mentioned that collector of experiences because, especially in today's climate, you don't really find many people that are talking about they want to collect those experiences. They want to, know, kind of live their life, enjoy their life, and kind of build those memories into their lives that they can look back on and say, "Oh man, I remember when I was here, or I remember going on that particular trip, or whatever the case may be." But and you also brought up a great point about the recession, and you being a money guy. That's an interesting conversation point for our viewers that will be watching this because money is a big factor, especially in today's world.
Yep.
And for those that are out of work because they're I mean, I think I just saw the news this morning of like 3 more million additional people file for unemployment. I think our totals are like 6 to 7 million, maybe as high as 10 million file for unemployment.
Yep.
If one of those 10 million people are watching this, and I hope they are, what kind of advice would you give to that person, both on the money perspective and then as like a job perspective or
Yeah.
like a
Yeah.
job hunting perspective?
There's a lot of people that are going through it right now. My heart is bleeding for them. There's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of people that can't make their next rent or mortgage payment, and so um, the first thing I can say is have faith. Have faith that this will turn around. This too shall pass. And it's my whole thing is mindset. I've endured some crazy things in my life. I've done some crazy things in my life, and I've come around full circle past those things, and they've helped me become who I am. And so there were tough times, and growing up, I was poor, and so that's what set me on a path to learn about money. But for people today in today's world, in today's economy, the biggest thing I could say to start off is you have to have the right mindset and you have to have the right habits. And that's all money is. It's mindset and habits. There's a great book by Tony Robbins called Money, Master the Game. And then there was another book he did, Unshakable. And it's really about mindset. It's about mentality. I'm writing a book right now that's in my own experience about mindset and money. And for people that are laid off, for people that are facing, a pay cut, for people that don't know what the future looks like, just know that that's normal for everybody. Even if you have money or if you don't have money, no one knows what's going to happen tomorrow. No one knows if they're going to be here tomorrow. So the mindset you have to have is taking advantage of the time that you have while you're here. So for me, what that looks like is, years ago I learned about this Stoic philosophy called memento mori. And memento mori, says, know that you're mortal, know that you're going to die, but let that be the tailwind to push you to do things that you maybe not would have done. So whether that's, right now you have the extra time to start a blog, to start a podcast, if you have the extra time to write that book, it's really tempting to want to lay on the couch or surf social media or, eat a lot of snacks. And I've been guilty of some of that for sure. I've had a couple extra adult beverages these last couple of weeks. So it's like, for me, it's trying to maintain some level of a schedule and a routine, which is super important, and keep working towards something, whether that's your health and wellness, whether that's something you're learning, whether that's, building a business. And really what people can do kind of practically look right now, two things when it comes to money. You can scale back on overspending, which is a huge habit people need to break anyway. I'm not saying don't live your life, but it's really easy because we have these stay-at-home orders that are going into effect tomorrow in Georgia. And, it's kind of the same thing we're dealing with now with social distancing and going out for only essential items like groceries or things like this. But that should help you curb your spending. Don't jump on Amazon Prime and buy a bunch of stuff you don't need, but try to maybe save some of that money. But also for those that are prepared for this market, it's a great time to buy if you're in that position. So this, for me, I have to give a disclaimer. This isn't advice for just one specific person. This is general advice. But if you have money right now, a lot of stocks are on sale between 20 and 85%. Some of those are kind of gambles for sure, because you don't know if those businesses will be around. But a lot of them are companies that have been around through multiple recessions. And so if you're in a position to buy right now or to get into the market, it may not be a bad time for some people. And the other thing I could say is if you have a side hustle, or if you have something that you've been looking to do on the side, like for me, I'm a huge comic book guy and I'm a huge action figure guy. And I have a bunch of comics and a bunch of action figures that I was saving for my kids so they could learn how to start a business and like everything. So I can even show, how to myself and my kids how to do that right now by putting stuff online and things that they like to do. So if you have a hobby, if you have an interest, you have a passion, and you have the time now, go all in, like go start that business, because maybe you'll come out of this thing, because we're just in the beginning of it, right? So it's like, they say April 30th is when some of these restrictions may be lifted. I'm not sure about that. I think that we're probably looking at another month on top of that at the very least. And then who knows how long this thing runs. So get started today, make wise money decisions today and enjoy today.
And you brought up a great point about starting a routine or being in a routine, and that has been a resonating factor for a lot of our guests previously about that routine. And if I was like, well, I never had a routine before, what would a routine look like, Jesse? What should I be focusing on as I go through my day in the routine? I think that would be an interesting conversation piece.
Yeah, there's two things on how to start a new habit. It's the mentality piece, which I'll keep going back to, and it's called eating the frog. So if it's something that's new and you've never done it before, you want to get it out of the way as early as you can each day, because if you let it linger and let it hang over you, it can actually cause like sadness and depression in people if there are things that are left undone. So you'll do the reverse. You'll actually hurt yourself. Like you won't jump into something. And so what I would say is two things: micro adjustments. So if you want to start writing a blog, instead of trying to write a full page or a full week's worth of content, take 2 minutes today, take 5 minutes today, just bite-sized chunks, and just start making that a habit where you do that every day. And so then now that moves into something that's called the power list. And so the power list is 5 things that you do every day to move your life, your business, your relationships, whatever it is, your faith, move those things forward every day. And so once you get to that, where you're doing 5 things every day that are new, by the end of the month, you've created 5 new habits. And at the end of that 1 month, you can go ahead and switch to 5 new things for month 2. And then by the end of 12 months, 1 year, you have 60 new habits. Most people don't have 60 new habits in a decade, and you've done it in 1 year. So the micro, it really starts with the mentality of kind of getting it out of the way. And then the micro of just doing 2 to 5 minutes of something new every day. And then and if you could do more than that, especially now with the extra time, I would recommend that, but some people just can't. And then moving into those power list items where you're doing 5 different things every day for a month, and then creating those 5 new habits monthly.
Wow. And that was a huge bomb. I hope everybody takes that into consideration, because even like for myself, looking back and listening to you, I was like, wow, 5 isn't really that big of a deal. And you're absolutely right. You're creating something special over the course of this next year if you continue doing those 5 things, because those 5 things could be huge impacts on your life going forward. And you're right, we do have a lot of time together to kind of focus on those 5 things. So, as I look through social media and I look through my LinkedIn profile, or not my profile, but my page, I see a lot of people talking about, oh, I'm having to work from home now. I'm having to be around my partner more, or I'm having to be around my spouse more. What would you say to that person to kind of ease that tension that might be there? And maybe not necessarily the tension, but that uncertainty that,
Yeah.
you're both having to work at home, maybe even with around kids, or if you have fur babies, those two, because they're going to be like, oh, hey, look, you're home. Pay attention to me. Give me
Yeah.
attention. Let's do this. And you're like, wait, I'm out. I have to work. I have work. I have to do that. I think that's an interesting conversation piece now that we're in our new normal for today.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is understanding that it is a new normal and that it is an adjustment period. It happens so fast, and there were things that were taken away from people. It wasn't, because they screwed up, and that's even a hard thing to digest right now. People that maybe lost a job, or a business is, about to close down or has closed down. It wasn't because they made a bad decision. So like, knowing that and knowing that it wasn't your fault can alleviate some pressure, and then understanding that this may be a new normal temporarily, or honestly, it could be a long-term thing. Understanding that now you have to build in some structure. And for a guy that's a rebel at heart, for a guy that likes to buck the status quo and be the little guy that fights against the big guy kind of thing, you need structure. And it doesn't go hand in hand with being a rebel. It's like the opposite of being a rebel. But I'm a rebel who loves structure. And I think a lot of people do. And especially being from the military, I needed structure at one point in my life. I needed rigidity because it saved my life. I was on a wayward path, and the structure and the rigidity put me on a straight and narrow path. And so you don't have to hate what you're doing, but you do have to have some structure. And what that could look like is an agreement between, if you're single, you don't really have to have the agreement. You have to have it with yourself, which is super important. But if you have a significant other or a roommate, you have to carve out time. And I would recommend blocks of time, 90-minute spurts, right? So if you can have 90 minutes to put your head down and focus on work, and then, okay, maybe you take 30 minutes or an hour and do something with the kids, right? Because that's super important too. And that's actually something I'm going through with my own situation is, my business, thank God, is, still doing well, and I'm still servicing clients. And in this market, it's actually super important for me to be visible, and for me to educate my clients and coach them and walk through life with them. But at the same time, I have a 5.5-year-old and a 3.5-year-old that are not in school or daycare right now. And for me too, it's a lot. And for me, I love being a dad, and I'm a big kid at heart, but I'm also their dad. And so I have to make sure that they have some sort of structure in their day, because my 5.5-year-old, who's in kindergarten, he has virtual learning that he has to do. And so that's actually helpful, because I can use some of the things for his schedule, set him up for the day, and then I can go and do work on some stuff. But it's blending. There's no such thing as balance. And we talked about this before we got on the show, the episode, was people want to have balance with work and pleasure and their health and wellness and all these things. It's impossible. Things happen. So you have to have balance, but you also have to have that paying attention and that kind of that focus during the time. So if you have, let's say you work 8 hours a day, and then you have an hour with the kids at night after they come home from school. Well, that's not balanced by definition, because 8 and 1, you don't have the same amount of time. But you can have the same amount of impact if you're doing things like putting down your cell phone and you're getting on the floor and playing with your kids, whether they're fur babies or real babies, right? Like they're all babies, right? But, so like giving that time and attention, focusing when you're doing whatever it is you're doing, and carving out that time, and almost being a stickler when it comes to protecting that time. You have to protect your time. And again, things happen and you can't be perfect. But this moment now, where we don't have a lot of structure or consistency in our schedules, we have to be forceful in terms of building that structure for ourselves and having some sort of consistency with it as we move along.
And you're right. You actually brought up a great point about blending. And yes, we did talk about that a little bit before we jumped on our show. But, talking about that blending aspect of the work and the life, and the other parts of your life that you may consider important, because you're like, my life is not just, my life, it's also my work. But, blending those two together is really, important, especially in today's environment, because we are now forced into working from home or working in a, in a more, and again, when I think of working from home, I'm working in a very comfortable environment. I'm working in a very normal environment for me. Being a remote worker for myself, I've been remote working now for several months. So for me, it's like, oh, okay, I continue working at home. But for several others, especially some of my friends, are, oh, I've been cube life for years. So I'm like, well, it's a different personality aspect you're having to consider, because you're right. If you're living with somebody, you're going to have to figure out, how do those people work when you're working,
Yep.
and how do those people deal with you being on the phone or holding a conference call or zooming or whatever the case may be. How is that going to impact their working? And and you have to really have that conversation. I think that's an important conversation to be having, um, as professionals and as humans, because it we've always been told work life balance, work life balance, work life balance. Well, now we're throwing that out the window. We're throwing that completely out the window. We're having to be like, now we're having to reimagine that work life balance into a work life blend, and that's a difficult thing for a lot of people. So, how do I manage that conversation? How do I manage that time per se of blending those two together?
It goes back to giving yourself grace in terms of, knowing that this is a different schedule, a different environment, especially if you haven't worked from home before, or you did it here and there. But so having that grace with yourself and knowing that, there is going to be some time for adjustment. There's going to be some time for some change. And so then it comes down to communication. So again, if you have anybody else living with you, if it's not just you, you have to work around each other's schedules. If you're both working, and whether or not you're both working from home is new or not, you still have to move around each other, like you said, conference calls and meetings and Zoom calls and different things that are happening. And so whether that's day to day, sometimes people can operate that way, where it's like, hey, if let's say your wife has a conference call Monday morning at 9 o'clock and the kids are home, well, then maybe you spend a little time with the kids during that time, and she could focus on the conference call. And then it flip-flops throughout the course of the day. If depending on your situation, and depending on how structured you can be, there has to be communication if you're living with somebody else, and figuring out who's got what going on, and like practical ways that you can do this. And I thought this was silly back in the day with my wife, but we started scheduling things on calendars, because we have so many things going on outside of the relationship and so many things going on individually, that we didn't want a conflict where we couldn't show up for a PTSA meeting, or like if we wanted to go on a run together, like we started scheduling that stuff in to our calendars. And again, me being a rebel, I was like, I hate this idea. This is awful. Why can't we just kind of flow and be spontaneous? Well, it actually made life a lot easier. And I don't know if some of your listeners know who this guy is, but his name is Jocko Willink. He's an amazing thought leader, ex-Navy SEAL commander, huge podcaster. He's really big on leadership and mindset, and he's really big on discipline. And the more, believe it or not, the more discipline and structure you have, the more freedom you'll have, because you'll know what your day looks like. You'll know when you have open times. You'll know if you get your work done and compressed in a certain amount of time versus letting it linger through the day. Let's say it's just 2 to 3 hours worth of work. You knock that out, then you have the rest of the day to do what it is that you need to do, right? You don't have to just work 8 hours a day. Yes, it's important to put the work in, but don't just be working for the sake of work, right? Don't just be doing things that you could be doing when you're, you could be spending time with your kids now while they're awake, and you can be sending emails before they wake up or at night when they're asleep, kind of thing. But for the things that are revenue generating, the things that are going to bring money into the house now, which is super important, more than it was just a few weeks ago, do those things from 9 to 5. Everything else that's kind of busy work, that can happen before 9 and after 5.
And that's a great perspective, because a lot of us are like, oh my God, I got to check my email. Oh my God, I got to respond to my email. Oh my God, my boss asked me to do this. Set those boundaries for not just for yourself, but also for your teams.
Yep.
And as a leaders, I think that's a huge change that we're having to undergo, because we're so used to being in the office from 9 to 5 or 8 to 4, whatever those times. You're in office. You're in an environment that's controlled, that's regulated for 8 hours a day. Now you're not in that regulated environment, and that's a huge difference for people. especially if they've never been able to be as free as they have been, as they're now being. And I know I've experienced a few of this in some of my calls that people are like, "Oh, hey, quarantine vacation." It's like, not really. You're still having to work. You're still
But
having
they're
to do your
quarantined.
job. I mean, it's like you're still expected to show up. You can't just be like, oh, you know what? I'm work from home. Work from home means I'm gonna sleep till whenever I want to, and I'll do the work whenever I feel like it. That's not exactly true. And as leaders, being accountable to that is huge, especially now. And how would you talk about that accountability, and how would you encourage those leaders to be able to keep the momentum and keep that passion going for your teams
Yep.
if as they're not being able to see each other? Because again, that's also a huge aspect for a lot of leaders, is they're so used to controlling and so used to seeing and being able to have those meetings one to one or face to face. Now they're having virtually, so now it's like, are they really, I think a lot of the conversation is, are these people really paying attention to me? I don't
Right.
know. I think they are, but who knows? They could be playing with their dog while talking to me. It's, the dog is right here, and it's like you can't see them, but they're not really paying attention. So how would you have that conversation with a leader that's like, how do I manage my team when I'm so used to seeing them every day?
Yeah. Yeah. So there's two things I want to touch before I'll get into the accountability piece, but you brought them up in your conversation, that it goes back to how you protect your time and how you make the most of your time while you're working from home. And the first thing I thought of was multitasking. And for people that have been, hearing about this over the last few years, but multitasking used to be expected. It used to be coached. It was like, to be more productive, but science has backed this up. It's impossible for a human to multitask effectively. You can't give 110% to two things at one time, right? So the first mindset piece is, don't try to do everything at once. Again, start with the hardest thing in the morning, eat the frog, get it out of the way, and then it's all downhill from there. Because if you have something super uncomfortable or super, you're not looking forward to it, and you leave it on top of the mountain and you're working towards that all day long, your mindset, your mentality gets weaker. Your enthusiasm gets weaker as the day goes on. You physically aren't as strong as you were when you first woke up. So like everything's stacked against you. So I would say, when it comes to the morning and when it comes to the day, get that first hard thing out of the way, which isn't easy to do. But if you can build that habit, that's the first habit maybe you want to work on. Then you can start sledding downhill for the rest of the day and not multitasking. The second piece that I thought of was the power of saying no, right? And so to protect your time. And so when you're in a business or in life where there's demands on your time outside of your own demand on your time, you have to get really, really astute and adept at saying no. You don't have to be a jerk about it, right? But you just want to tell people no to protect your time. Like, let's say you set up a 90-minute block, right? And this 90-minute block comes from the 12-week 12-week year, which is a book that shows people how to be amazingly productive and effective. And it takes the year and it breaks it down to quarters versus looking at a year. Like, how do we hit these yearly goals? And then it breaks it down even further. So 90 minutes has been shown to be a good sprint time to get something done. And so if something comes into your life, and again, like you said, if the dog rolls up during the middle of a meeting, or if your son runs by and he's going crazy because he's 5 years old, like my son, have some grace for your son and for yourself, and those people understand. And if they don't, screw them. Like, who cares what other people think, right? You have to be productive, you have to be professional, but like, people have to understand that life goes on, okay? And so the power of saying no is, if something comes to you during that 90 minutes and you're focused on following up on appointments or prospecting, right? That's huge. Like, don't stop building your business right now. Most people are like, well, businesses are going out of business. Vendors aren't going to be around. My clients may not be around. That's not necessarily true. Still get out there and still try to build business. It may be hard. You may have to adjust, but like, that goes back to the 90 minutes of, if your 90-minute block right now is prospecting or sales, don't let anything else get in the way of that, and set up communication and parameters prior to that 90 minutes so that can stay on task. Now, getting back to how do leaders have conversations on, like, just our accountability. I think the biggest thing is when, and it just give me, because I kind of went on a rant there. Throw me back, kind of like like a layup or a volleyball toss, kind of on what your question was about leaders and accountability.
About in leadership now, especially, is going to be more crucial than ever. And a lot of these leaders have never been in an environment where they're not physically attached to their teams, or they're not
Yep.
physically attached to their people or to their office environment. So having to adjust that adjust that personality, adjust that mentality now, because you're right. A lot of the leadership stuff that we're dealing with as leaders deals with your mental state, your mental ability to adjust.
Yep.
How would I, as a leader, come say, Jesse, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to handle not having my teams right within arm's reach.
Yep.
How do I adjust to that? What would I do to make me effectively leading my teams as we go through this new normal?
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. So trust, empathy, and extreme ownership. So having trust in the people that you had before, you had them on your team for a reason, and the people above you have you on their team for a reason, and having trust that that relationship wouldn't change because the dynamic has changed, and being empathetic and understanding and sharing those words. Like the biggest thing I could say that, I worked in corporate for years, and, been a business owner on and off my whole life, and been doing, running my own business for the last few years. But having conversations with people in real conversations and being empathetic has completely opened so many doors for me versus like being a robot and stiff and trying to be like too corporate, like almost like a politician and like playing a game. Like if you're like, hey, you're in a conference call right now and you're talking to somebody, and again, let's use the example of somebody, your dog or your kid runs by. Don't try to hide it or like, lose your attitude with your kid and tell them like hurt their feelings. Be like, hey, listen, Bryan, I'm at home like you. My kid's running by right now. He's 5 years old. He's going crazy. Like, do you want him to jump on the call? Like, you can kind of like work it in, like where you can play with it a little bit, but being authentic and having empathy a little bit for yourself and for other people, that's going to go a long way. Now, the practical side of all that is extreme ownership. So what you want to do, and I'm assuming at this point on this scenario, this has already happened, but you need for people that are on your team to have buy-in. So they actually give a crap about what the mission is, right? And so whatever it is that is going on for the company or for a project or for a directive, like people aren't going to care about it any more than you do unless they have buy-in and they have ownership. And it goes back to Jocko Willink. He has a book called Extreme Ownership and how to actually build that. And I would recommend reading that book. But if people feel like they have a piece of ownership in something, they're going to innately work harder versus if someone just says, go do this, go do that. And more importantly, as a leader, you have to lead from the front. You can't be there's these memes that have come up over the years where you see, it's like during ancient Egypt times where there's a pharaoh and he's behind his group of people and he's like hitting them with the whip and they're pulling him along versus the leader. That's like a manager. And then there's the leader where he's in front of his people and he's pulling his people along, but they're also helping him push along too, or push her along too. And so that just goes back to buy-in. It goes back to the conversations that you've had or that you're having now, maybe giving more responsibility, maybe giving them opportunities to monetarily. They want to be rewarded with freedom of time. They want to be rewarded with recognition. There's a few kind of cognitive biases people need there. But if you can impart, this isn't just a directive for Bryan, this isn't just like a company mission, but it's part of my mission, you won't need to motivate them. You don't need to kind of keep them in check or like make sure that they believe in what they're doing.
Those are great insights, and I think the buy-in aspect of this is huge because that goes back to why are these people still in my organization? Why are they still on my team? Well, they're on your team because they obviously have a reason. They actually have a reason to be there. They actually want to be there. So, and people are not just going to jump off just because. They're going to be jumping off because people don't quit jobs. They quit people. They quit the leaders. And I think that's going to be a huge aspect when we do finally get through this, is who's going to stick around for that leader that drives them crazy all the time? Who's going to be like, you know what? I had that boss that just wouldn't leave me alone. That would just constantly, hey, what are you doing? Every 5 minutes. And of course that's going to kill your team. So, if you're a leader watching, so I encourage you to have that conversation with yourself about where's my mentality at? How am I getting buy-in from my team? How am I getting them to say, this is valuable to me because it's valuable to my leader? and driving that ship forward together instead of being, oh well, I'm gonna paddle one way and I'm gonna go paddle this way, and then we're gonna figure out how do we, instead of just, let's all paddle together, let's all
I
go
would toss
together.
that back to you too, because that's a great insight as far as you kind of alluded to micromanaging, and no one wants to be micromanaged. No one really wants to be told what to do every 5 minutes of their life, right? And so, what are some things that you found to be effective when it comes to leadership position or not, just in terms of people that need to kind of do their own thing, manage themselves for at some period of time, especially during this time specifically where they're working from home? What are some things that you've seen that have been helpful for people to be able to kind of get through those situations? And even if you are a leader, managing your teams effectively to be able to get the mission accomplished and still be happy at the end of the day.
I think the biggest part for me as a leader is to communicate. And by communicate, I'm not just saying, here's everything that you need to do for the day. I'm saying, here's some goals I need you to meet, and here's a deadline I think you can meet it in. Because, again, as leaders, we should be looking at setting goals that are attainable by us, because we should be able to do the same work that our teams do. And our teams should be able to do maybe not the same work that we do, because, again, we're being given more, but there should be the expectation of, if I can do this, you can do it too, because this is probably stuff I have had to do through my career. So you should be able to do it. And I'm also helping to push you to grow too. So having that growth conversation too is, hey, I understand we're going through a rough time, but I want you to continue growing. I want to continue seeing you develop, because at some point, I want you to take over. I want you to take on your own team. I want to be able to be confident to say to my boss, hey, we need to promote X person because, through this quarantine or through our work from home time, I have noticed that they have done X, Y, and Z, or they have taken on X, Y, and Z projects and been successfully implementing them throughout this time. Because, again, we will this will end at some point. We're going to go back to our offices, and that's another key point that we need to take away is, while we're in this, we need to consider how we're going to implement all the changes we've done into
Yep.
our next phase of this, and whether that's we're going to completely go remote in an organization, or we're going to be like, what, come to the office 3 days a week. Well, what's the other 2 days look like? Well, you've kind of now experimented on those 2 days by having months of work from home, or weeks, or whatever it may end up being. You know, having that plan and having that kind of conversation of, hey team, I get it, we're work from home now. It may not be a permanent deal, it could be, we don't know that, but as it stands right now, here's some goals, here's some objectives we're trying to accomplish. And again, it's about communication, and you're right, empathy as well too, because that team member may have so much on his plate from his personal life that it's affecting his professional life. And you have to be okay with that as a leader and understand that. And again, that goes back to, how are you conversing with your team? Are you sending that text message or that email saying, hey, how are you doing? Or what's going on with you today? Or, hey, I noticed you haven't been online yet. Are you okay? And not just saying, I see you're not online. What's wrong with you? Why are you, what's going on? What are you doing? Having It's a difference in tone, and it's also a difference in perspective. So, as leaders, we need to gain those perspectives, not just for us personally, but also us professionally. So I think that's a huge part of where we're going to see a change at, is the leaders should be saying, what am I doing wrong that my team doesn't respond to me at 6 o'clock at night? Well, they might be eating dinner with their family. They might be having time with their kids. Be okay with that. Encourage that, because, again, you don't want to be that boss that says no, 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 no. You want to be the boss that says yes, but here's some things I need, maybe in change of that time you're spending with your family. So I think it's going to be a really interesting growth period, and as leaders, we should be welcoming that growth. We should be encouraging that growth, not just of ourselves, but those around us too. And be open to those conversations. If your team reaches out to you, say, hey, I have time from X to X. When can you meet me during these times? If they say no, then be flexible with them. Be understanding and say, you know what, I get it. What can we do to maybe meet in the middle? So, and I think we're going to see a lot of those if we start implementing those changes now. When we do finally end this whole quarantine, lockdown, whatever you want to call it, we're going to be better people for it. We're going to be better leaders for it because our teams will respect us and say that, oh, he's not just pushing us forward. He's not just driving the hammer on us. He actually cares, or she actually cares. They actually want to see us be more than just whatever our job title is. And I think that's another key aspect we need to start looking at. Is we're more than just a job title. We're more than just a role we sit in. We're actually, value added propositions for each organization. And I guess value added proposition is kind of an odd thing to say, but we're value add in our own unique way. So I think that's a fun, if we can all kind of sit down and gather those insights together, we'll see a more robust organization when we come out of this at the end of the day.
Yep, I think you summarize it beautifully, and the word "together" is the most important thing. Just we're gonna get through this together. We're gonna go through hard times together. We're gonna grow together. But for anybody who's ever done anything worth mentioning, it's the hard times that bring people together, and that's what builds the best bonds, right? So whether that's military, whether that's athletics, whether that's corporations, it's the tough times that help people grow together, and it helps them stick together even longer. And that's where you get a lot of buy-in is when you see people going through those efforts and building and suffering together in a sense, but then also growing together and then evolving together.
And the veteran aspect of this is really interesting too, because and I brought this up to my teams as well, as like, for a veteran, this is okay with me. I'm very used to this kind of environment of we're being kind of stuck in a certain area. We're kind of being told to just focus on your job, focus on whatever that may be, whether it be your family, your job, or both. That's very comfortable for us. And you're a veteran as well. I think that's an interesting conversation piece that the corporate America can start having, is how do we start incorporating our veteran community into our organizations, because they're so used to these crisis management situations. They're so used to managing, difficult conversations. And I think that would be an interesting piece for you to kind of speak on too.
Yeah, it goes to the beginning of a relationship in terms of interviewing more, veterans, more qualified veterans. Now, you don't have to be a veteran owned and operated company to do that. If you are, congratulations and thank you. But you can also focus more on that community as a whole, because there are a lot of veterans that have experienced so many things in terms of what their job was, what their experience was. There's so many valuable experiences and pieces of wisdom that come from service and come from traveling the world, or being a part of an operation, or experiencing something that most people don't experience, and then having perspective that's a little bit different, that they can offer valuable insights that maybe someone who didn't have that experience couldn't. And so I think that it starts from the beginning, and maybe not overlooking a veteran. Maybe for some people that are in the hiring process now or looking for jobs, this could be good, where if they're a hiring manager, or if they're making that final decision, just because someone, let's say, someone coming out of the military after X amount of years hasn't been in corporate for a certain amount of time, that doesn't mean that their job, that they're looking to apply for, doesn't map over perfectly, or even more so, they have some other experiences that would add way more value to that position because of what they've seen and what they've done. So I would say it starts with, giving more veterans a shot on the front end, and then also capitalizing on their strengths that maybe don't fit the specific job role. Like, we need X, Y, Z. Well, I also have X, Y, Z, plus I've seen these things over here, and then let them bring value. And this is also where you can get the buy-in that we talked about. Hey, Bryan, you serve in the military, these are your experience now, and having a different perspective or different insight can be a game changer for a team or for a company. I think that's really where it's important. So if you have somebody who's in your company that is a veteran, leaning on them during this time, because we've all seen shit in the military, and this is pretty shitty right now, right? So how can we have somebody come in who's been through that tough time and share their experience with us, so that maybe we can have a different perspective as a team who haven't seen those things?
No, that's a great perspective, and obviously great piece of valuable knowledge that I hope our corporate and civilian clients and partners actually listen to. Because again, when you're looking at the veteran population, you're looking at a leader that has been exposed to so many different opportunities to grow. They've been exposed to many different situations. There's just so much that this veteran or even their spouse now too has been exposed to or has to do that, maybe their civilian counterparts hasn't. But that's given them a chance to grow. That's given them a chance to really dig deep in themselves and kind of understand who are they at their core and what kind of work can they do besides just the qualifications. What other extra things do they bring to the table that may be a valuable asset to you? And especially when you're looking at today's environment, you're going to need those kind of people to lead your organizations. You're going to want that kind of knowledge base or that person on your team to kind of lean on and say, well, what do we do now? How do we do this? What do we do to get through it? And I think that should be a key aspect of, if you're looking to hire people, look to hire your veteran community and look inside your veteran community for those gems, because they may be buried in there. They may be hiding, but guess what? They're there. You might just have to go find them. You may have to go dig for them. But at the end of the day, you're going to be happier having that person because you're going to bring a wealth of knowledge and wealth of experience that you may not find anywhere else. And, as we start wrapping this up, how would somebody contact you, Jesse, and how would they keep this conversation going?
Yeah. So the first thing is, right now, a lot of people have money questions. They have really huge concerns about, where their next paycheck is coming from or what to do with their money right now and not let it go to waste. And so if people are having money questions of any kind, they can reach out to me directly. I'm at, my email is Jesse, Jesse, at the number 46 and 2. So that's Jesse at 46 and 2 wealthpartners.com. So Jesse at 46 and 2 wealthpartners.com. You can reach out to me directly. You can check out the website, which is 46 and 2 wealthpartners.com. If people need some insight or want to hear from some other thought leaders in different, capacities, they can check out the podcast, and that's called The Jesse T Show. Anywhere that you can find podcasts, and then it's also a YouTube channel. So The Jesse T Show. And then, if people are looking to connect with me on LinkedIn, it's also Jesse Todisco. It's Todisco. And I'm also pretty big over on LinkedIn and Instagram. It's at Jesse_T. So check me out, make a connection. I'll accept it. I'll respond, and we can see if we can collaborate and learn about each other's missions and how we can add value to one another.
That's huge, especially in today's environment, collaboration. And I encourage you guys, if you want some good insight, reach out to Jesse. He's a phenomenal leader in the space of not just wealth, but also just inspiration. So thank you, Jesse, for your time. And I want to end on a high note. What inspiring message would you have for those that are like, I'm just down. I need some good news. What would you tell that person that I need some inspiration?
There's so much to be said there. I always think of movie quotes. I think of movies, things like Rocky run through my mind for so many reasons, all those montages, things that he's done and how inspirational he is to go from nothing to overcoming some of the biggest odds. There's this saying that the night, the night is always darkest before the dawn, right? And so right now, things are starting to get pretty dark for people. But just know, and this goes back to just kind of everything we've been through, that this is something that has happened. Usually every 10 years, we go through this recession type cycle, and it will end. And we were on a 12-year run with our last market, which was incredible. And so as dark as it is now, know that there is light at the end of the tunnel. And I would say the way to get through that is support and doing Zoom calls with people, because we're social distancing. Calling your friends. I've done a few Zoom calls with beer, right? So you can have a beer and you can talk to your buddies or your friends or your coworkers, whatever it is, and enjoy it a little bit. You find inspiration elsewhere. I've been watching a lot of people doing like quarantine parties. Like Shaquille O'Neal is really big with his family right now, and Shaq is hilarious. He's throwing concerts at his house with his kids. So if you can try to find humor and love and positivity, whether that's through the lens of somebody else or creating it yourself. I think that you have to, again, enjoy the now because we're not guaranteed tomorrow, and find the inspiration to push you through. And again, we're going to have dark days, but the dark days will end.
That's a fantastic way to wrap the show up today. Thank you so much for your time, Jesse, and I really appreciate it. I know our audience will be excited to hear about you and want to connect with you, and I hope they do, and I hope they reach out and have those conversations with you. If it's just about money, I mean, right now money is powerful. I mean, you're right. A lot of people may not know where their next paycheck will come in, but if they're prepared, they won't have to worry. They won't have to stress. So having that person on their side, like you, saying, "Hey, I understand it. Here's how we can make your money go farther, and here's how we can prepare for the future, so you won't have to worry if we do end up going through this again. Who knows? You never. Again, we don't know. There could be another novel virus in 2 years from now. I mean, you can never tell. So being prepared today will definitely ease tomorrow's pain. So thank you for sharing all this. And it's been a wonderful, having you on the show today, Jesse. Again, thank you so much for your time. And again, my name is Bryan Shue. And that was Jesse Todisco. And welcome, and thank you for listening and watching Lockdown with Thought Leaders. Again, be prepared for another episode. I can't tell you who's going to be on the show next, but stay tuned. We will be back with another awesome thought leader. Thank you guys so much for watching. Y'all have a great day.
Thanks
Bye-bye.
so much.